Now that it's time to get started on the floor, I went ahead and set the remnants of the old floor in place just to kind of fine-tune the measurements. I was kind of lucky that the more difficult part of the floor was still in good enough condition to where I can just use it as a template and just neaten up the edges. But if you don't have anything left of the old floor, it's not that hard to get the measurements just with either a flat board or a level. And if you're going to do it that way, you just would start from the front of the boat and all the way to the back, just every foot or so, take a measurement. I mean, you might want to do it every 6 inches, every foot, that's up to you. But once you get the measurements on where the floor is going to be, basically just from right here on one side to over there, then to figure out where to notch out for the ribs, you just set your level or your board or something across the stringers, and where it makes contact with the rib, just measure from there to the edge where the floor would be, and just transfer those measurements over to your board. And to transfer the measurements, it's just a matter of, like for the width, just mark yourself a center line on your new plywood and then center your measurements there. And once you have all your measurements marked out on both sides, you can just put a screw or something in at each one of those measurements and take a piece of scrap aluminum that's flexible enough and just bend it around that radius and mark it. But luckily on this one I don't have to do that. I've got the old material to use as a template. But on the next one I may have to do that again. Alright, I've got the first piece clamped down to the new plywood so that I can use it as that template. I just basically traced around the old piece, and to straighten up the lines, I did take measurements just like I would have if I didn't have the original floor. But you just, wherever the ribs are, you can just make a mark and then use your T-square to get everything straightened up. And if you didn't have a template, you'd use all your measurements, and like I said, you would put a nail or a screw or something at your measurement mark, and then take a thin piece of aluminum, which the T-square can be used for that also, and you would just hold it up against your screws and then bend it all the way around, and you can trace it and get a really nice radius arch. But that's if you don't have a template to go by, or the old floor. But even if you have the old floor, it's nice to use that just to straighten up your lines. Now that the first piece is cut out, we're going to test fit it in the boat before we drill the holes in it. It turned out pretty decent. I'm not the best carpenter in the world, but I just used a cheap Harbor Freight jigsaw and it held up pretty well, especially doing the beveled edges on them. So let's go ahead and test fit it in the boat and see how it is. The first piece is sitting in place and it fit perfect. So now we're going to get started on the next piece. Since the edges of the next piece are pretty brittle, to get a better measurement, I just basically did the same thing I would as if I didn't have the original floor at all. And of course the floor is my flat piece of wood to get my measurements with, at least. But I marked at the 1 foot mark, 2 foot, and since it's the same from there back, just measure at the end. And measured the width at the front edge, which on this one just turned out to be 60 inches. Then at that 1 foot mark was 61. The 2 foot mark was 61.5, and then from there back is also 61.5. So I'll just transfer these measurements to a fresh sheet of plywood, and I'm not even going to remove this one just to, you know, to have as a template or anything. I did have to mark where it needs clearance for these, which on this side it's 7.5 inches to 9.25 inches, and I'm just going to notch it out about 3/4 of an inch. Of course, the other side would be different, 8.25 to 10 inch, but that's okay. Now all we have to do is just mark a center line at the greatest width of this board onto our new piece of plywood, and then do all the measurements from there. I figured I'd go ahead and show a extra step for the people that don't have any floor or template. Like I said earlier about, you know, just getting the measurements of the full width of the widest part of that section of floor that you'll need, and then just marking that widest width onto your next piece of plywood, which on this one is the 61.5. So I just marked that all the way across, 61.5, and then marked it at center, which was 30.75. Then I put my mark at every foot so that I could do the measurements that I took at every foot on the inside of the boat. Then I just center those measurements up, you know, on the center line. So like I said, the very front will be 60 inches wide, and the next mark will be 61, and then the next mark was 61.5, and then 61.5 was just the same straight back from there. So I've got that all marked out on here. I mean, that's basically all you have to do if you don't have any salvageable floor that you can use as a template or anything. So it's not that difficult, just takes a few extra minutes, and you know, even with a piece of floor in the boat, I still ended up doing it, so it's no big deal. The next thing you'll see, it's getting a little dark out here, so next thing you'll see will probably be tomorrow. I'll have all the floor sections cut and just sitting in the boat. I'll still have to mark the cutout area for the bilge, so that'll be tomorrow. Alright, I've got the front piece and the middle piece sitting in place. I've got this second piece of scrap wood sitting on top right now because the 1/2 inch plywood will not support your weight without having the support of the foam underneath. I could have gone with a 3/4 inch plywood, but you know, I was planning on putting foam underneath like it had originally, and 3/4 would have been just overkill, so I went with the 1/2 inch, but unfortunately, time constraints and tight budget, the foam's going to have to wait. So I've got some aluminum angle, and I'm just going to add some cross braces to the stringers, and that'll make up for the lack of support underneath. Right now I'm working on the rear piece, which it's an easy one because it's just 61.5 inches wide on this boat, and 4 foot from that piece to the rear. But the hard part on it's just making the bilge cutout, which on that one I'm just making it, you know, 16 inches deep and then 25 inches wide, which is the width between those stringers. And of course the edges are beveled, you know, to about a 45 or 50 degree angle. I basically cut them 45 degrees and then use the belt sander to smooth them out a little bit more to make up for the angle of the hull, and also to clear the rivets over on the edge. But I did make a small mistake. I dropped the front piece on its corner and chipped it, so I just ran the belt sander around it and smoothed it out. But I mean, I chipped a good 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch off, and if it was going to be exposed, I mean, if the side pieces, you know, if they weren't going to cover it up, I would end up just remaking that whole front section. But luckily it's going to be hidden. Now later we are going to put either the 2-part pour-in foam in this boat, We're going to have to put some plastic down first so that it doesn't clog up all the drainage in this boat. And I do want it to be removable, so I'll put plastic down, then spray it with like a silicone spray or something, then do the pour-in foam. After it cures, I'll cut it nice and flat on top, you know, even with the top of the stringers. Then I'll probably slice it into easy to remove sections, pull it out, remove the plastic, and then reinstall the foam. That way it won't clog up anything, and if I ever pull the floor up, it'll be easy to move around. But that's going to have to wait. I may even go with an aluminum floor, I don't know. But that's all in the future and depends on where the budget's at. So let's go ahead and get this rear section cut out. All the floor is now cut, and it's just a matter of painting it. Well, I'll probably drill the holes first for the rivets and everything, but then I'll paint it, seal it all up real good, then rivet it in. And like I said, I am going to make some supports for underneath. Either that, or I might even double up, do a sheet of plywood, you know, between the stringers, 25 inches wide, and run it front to back. I mean, I know that's longer than one piece, but you get the idea of what I plan to do. At the very least, I'll double it up where the seats are going to go, but we may run aluminum braces. We may do something a little different and go with some 2x4 bracing and just seal that up the same way we do the floor. But doubling up the plywood underneath is also an option. So we'll figure that out soon. Well, once again, the progress is being held up by rain, just like last year, where rain was keeping me from painting the transom and stuff. Well, now, this year, even though I have the carport on the driveway, I still need to cut the wood and stuff out there in the yard. All my plywood's on that trailer right now, and I don't have enough room under the carport for everything, but I did pick my tools up real quick, put them all on this piece of wood. Didn't expect the wind to blow this hard though. Well, water's making it a good ways under the carport. Even the front of the boat, which is completely under the carport's getting soaked, but it's okay. The wood's still staying dry. As soon as this rainstorm passes, we'll get back to work.